some important data from the state of higher education for Black Californians. Although more Black students are graduating from high school, going to college, and earning degrees than ever before, according to this report, Black students in California and across the United States face persistent barriers and disparities, such as challenging learning environments, inequitable access to quality instruction and curriculum. There are gaps in graduation rates. There's also a gap in the access to rigorous core academic content. And they also have limited or less access to extra and co-curricular activities and successes. So here you'll see, for example, that less than 1/3 of Black students and less than 1/3 of Latinx students complete the A through G course requirements that are needed, for example, for eligibility for the California State University system or the UC University of California system. Of course, there are other institutions, but these are the two primary institutions that the report examined, and they're the two largest in the state. And so they're significantly less than most of their other peers overall. In fact, 10 points below the state average, which is about 42% of those students. So whether you know the California system or not, in short, these courses are needed for college entrance, and especially in the CSU and the UC system. And you'll see that Asians and whites, for example, in California are above the state average, Asians way above the state average, and have an advantage in that sense in terms of entering college with the courses that they need. What we have found in this report and other reports as well is that what contributes to these outcomes for Black and Brown students, and also contributes to the outcomes for non-Black and non-Brown students, are the expectations of their teachers. And Bozer, 2014, Gregory and Huang, 2013, and also in this report from about Black Californians, that it stated that teachers actually have lower expectations in these studies of students of color, of Black and Brown students. What does this mean? This then has an impact on academic performance. It also has an impact on self-concept, what I think about who I am and who I think I am and what my abilities are. And so if we imagine that students are in a context of limited resources and also having teachers who may not every teacher is this way, of course, may not have expectations of them as students coming from particular communities, socioeconomic, racial, ethnic backgrounds, then we can imagine that their outcomes might be lower than other students. Let's turn now to the undergraduate population and take a look at, once they now come to college, what are some of the things that we notice? So in a 2017 report by the National Center for Educational Statistics, what we learned is that the share of non-white undergraduates jumped. So this is a 20-year period from 1997 to 2017. And we'll see that the number of non-white undergraduates jumped from 28% to 45% in that 20-year period. And they're working on data for the next 10 or so years. And so Pew Research Center attributes this jump to the large number of Hispanic students who have entered not the workforce, but the student body of undergraduate institutions. So non-white undergraduate students grew by more than 60% in a 20-year period, and the data is up to the last 3 or so years. This is a big jump, and this is important to note. However, what we've seen is that the share of non-white full-time faculty members grew from 14 to 24% in that same period. Not as much in terms of the growth of the non-white undergraduate students. Analysis has shown from the Pew Research Center that while racial and ethnic diversity has increased among US college faculty over the past 2 decades, professors are still more likely than their students to be white. US college students still more likely than faculty to be racial or ethnic minorities, according to the report. This is important to note, because in the research, what we've learned from these reports and other educational studies reports is that a diverse learning environment positively impacts pedagogy, student-faculty relationships, persistence, opportunities for leadership. It impacts networking relationships. So it's important because the ethnicity, race, gender, and other factors impact overall the academic learning environment. And we also know in the research that instructors, teachers, and faculty members, and other lecturers and so forth will teach, in some cases, depending on discipline, from their perspective. The examples that we provide, the things that we know, the things that we learn are very much informed by our own environment and experience. It helps to read, it certainly helps to listen to our students, to listen to our young people. I think I'm getting to that age where I'm using some terms and they're like, yeah, we don't say that anymore. And they might tell me what it means. Someone said to me the other day, actually, a younger colleague said the word stan. And I was like, what is that? And it's a combination of being a fan and I really love what you're doing or something. And it took me a moment to put it all together, right? So it was thinking it's wonderful. And I thought, well, I wouldn't have put it that way, but thanks for sharing that with me. That's important information. Many years ago, some people would say, right on. I don't know if people still say that. Perhaps some people do, but there's so many other ways to say that something is wonderful. I heard some young people the other day say, oh yeah, that's great. That's sick. I'm thinking, who's sick? They're like, no, that's sick. That's really amazing. So there we go. So even in the vocabulary that we might use to teach, there might be some disconnect because we might be teaching from our generational perspective. That's just to give an example there. But the more we read, the more we're connected to media, the more we thinking about the learning environment is the more that we're likely to diversify that. It certainly does help to know who your instructors are, and it helps to diversify the K through 12 as well as the college environment. So let's talk now about the race and ethnicity of college faculty. A report by the US Department of Education published by the National Center for Educational Statistics then in more detail provided what I just talked about, which is that 76% of all college and university faculty members were white. So if you look at the chart here, the dark purple would be our white male and our white female colleague faculty members, compared to 55% of undergraduates who are white in the college environment right now. So the majority, we're talking about more than 2/3 of our faculty across the United States. This is post-secondary. So anyone that's teaching post 12th grade, 76% are white. By ethnic group, just 5% of faculty members, 5% are Latinx compared to 20% of students. And 6% of professors, that's the lightest purple, if you look at the lightest one, actually following the dark purple. So 6% of professors, the lightest purple line, were Black compared to 14% of their students. So it's very unlikely that students of any racial or ethnic group may have a Black professor. Over 20 years ago, when I started teaching in the college environment, I knew for some students, this was the first time that they were seeing a Black person of any gender or cultural group teaching them. We'll see, however, that Asians were the exception. So Asians are the exception in that they make up 11% of professors and 7% of their students. So in terms of proportionality, they are more proportional than their students. Whereas with Hispanic or Latinx groups, 5% are faculty members compared to 20% of the students in the college environments across the US. And 6% of professors are Black compared to 14% of students in the United States. Let's now turn to talk about, so we've looked at the K through 12, and we've also talked about the jump in demographics and the numbers in Black and Brown students. And now we're going to look at the educational attainment of adults 25 and older. So what this tells us now is who's getting degrees, who is able to get an associate's degree, a high school diploma in the US. And this is a report from ACE, the American Council on Education, and the Mellon Foundation. It's called Race and Ethnicity in Higher Education, a Status Report. Asians had the highest level of degree attainment than any other racial and ethnic group. A little less than 1/3 of all Asians had attained a bachelor's degree, about 30%. So if you look at the light blue line, that will show you the bachelor's degrees in the United States. The Latinx population, here it's noted as Hispanic, had the lowest level of degree attainment among racial and ethnic groups. Again, focusing on the light blue bar, you'll notice who has attained college degrees ages 25 and older in the US. Knowing, of course, understanding and respecting that students stop out for a number of reasons, financial, family, economic, etc. But this is for adults ages 25 and older that we're looking at. If you look at the high school credential, so that's the dark blue line, the dark blue bar. The majority of Latinx people, 60%, had attained only a high school credential. That is the highest they've achieved and may not have gone to college. So it's high school credential or less. Light blue line, Hispanics have achieved that compared to other groups, such as 45% of Blacks have attained a high school diploma or less. And then persons of more than one race, 35%. If you take a look at the data on the far left of all the racial and ethnic groups, what we see is that in the United States, the average for those who have a college degree is a little bit more than 20% for degree attainment. The only groups that have, so again, we're looking at the light blue bar where it says all racial and ethnic groups. So it's a little bit more than 20% of all the groups in the United States. The only groups that have exceeded or are above that national average are Asian, white, and persons with more than one race. All other groups, important to note, mostly groups of color, are below the national average for degree attainment. And you'll see for the average educational attainment for high school is close to 30. Some of the same groups also have attained, so their numbers would be higher for high school diploma, have attained the high school diploma or less, but not a bachelor's degree. So as we analyze the demographic data around academic achievement, who's currently in college, the ethnic, racial diversity of the groups that are there, it is important to examine educational outcomes and persistence and think about what we might do to bring about some of these changes. Examining degree attainment is important because it is also related to economic and social mobility. It is related to and a predictor of increased opportunity for oneself, reliable healthcare, increased wealth and wealth transfer from one generation to the next. And so knowing where we are is one of the places we can go before we start thinking about, well, then what do we need to do? What is needed to accomplish the changes to address these persistent barriers and the disparities? There has been progress because there are more students of color in the college environment than even 20 years ago. And in that 1997 to 2017 period, we'll also see there has been growth, although not as much in the faculty ranks. And that will change over time as well. And some of the areas that we're going to address today are in fact being addressed in many institutions across the US. So I'll take a Baldwin quote here to just give some background to say, here is why we look at some of these data as sometimes depressing and upsetting as they are. Not everything that is faced can be changed. But in short, we cannot change anything or nothing can be changed until it is faced, as Baldwin says. So what is important from my perspective? What is needed? Leadership. Leadership is core to bringing about change, to bringing that influence and setting the vision and to working on goals and a direction and a common way to move forward. What is leadership and what is it not is also what I'm going to address. And so I'll share a quote from Tarina Allen, who is a CEO of Aviaris Institute. Leadership is not about titles, it's not about seniority, it's not about status. And she goes on to say more, that it is about influencing people around you to do and to become more. And specifically, transformational leadership is about using our actions, your actions, to elevate others and put them on their path to greatness. And this is why I love being in education and I love consulting to organizations that are a part of this mission, because education helps us to be better. We see differently, we hear differently, we have the opportunity to grow and to bring about changes for ourselves and for others. So leadership is not only about a title or a designation. You'll see here again the word influence, bringing about results and inspiring others, motivating others. And here, which is from Robin Sharma, so it has a business slant, teammates and customers. But it is about impact, influence, and inspiration. So in this framework, who's involved? What do we need to do? What do we need to think about as we think about bringing about changes in our institutions? And since leadership is not about a title, it means you, it means I, in our various roles, in our various jobs, whether we're in the home, outside of the home, whatever our discipline is, whatever our calling is, we can do something. And so that's what we're working on today. And so if we keep equity in mind, which is what we were just discussing, knowing where people are, what they're bringing to the table, what their needs are, we then need to ask ourselves, well, who needs those resources? How much and for whom would educational access need to improve? And so it's not just, well, we're all going to do the same thing for every institution, for every community, and this is going to make it work. But it means then that everything we do as part of that process that we talked about must be supported by the data, which we looked at, as difficult as it is to examine. And then from that starting point to say, what tutoring programs, what books, what speakers, which community member can be a part of this change and to help us with what we need. There are also some more futuristic questions. Quite a bit of my own, if anybody has done the Gallup Strengths Finder, I've done it a few times in the last few years. I suggest you Google it, and if your institution is able to afford it, or if you can on your own, you may find out what your top strengths are. Strategy is one of my top ones. So we're in this current moment, and I find from time to time, I'm in the future. I'm already thinking about 2027. I'm thinking about 2044 and who might that president be or what institution might be there at that time. And so I raise that because part of what we're thinking about, and I encourage you to think about in your endeavors, is to then think in the enterprise of education about the career fields and occupations that have strong labor markets. Why this is important is that it then helps us in part, because education is not only about to get a job. That is a part of it in some cases. It's also about learning and change and improvement. But looking at the labor market and where there might be demands in the future and currently help us then to craft that type of pedagogy and curriculum that is applicable, that is connected to what students need and what our society needs. So right now we know that healthcare professions are in demand, and not since COVID, even before that. So nurses, doctors, PAs, technicians, imaging consultants, all kinds of persons in the healthcare field are needed. Teachers are also needed to teach those people, right? We need teachers in STEM, we need art teachers, we need a number of persons. We need persons in administration as well in those types of institutions to help. So we know for sure, and in some cases business too. So we know that in some STEM disciplines, we know that in education there's a demand, healthcare in particular, and some other professions. And so if we know that this is the case, what then must we do to adjust our goals, our aims, our efforts in order to prepare our students for that, right? And so many of our colleges and our universities, many of our schools are doing that and are beginning to think about and then what do they need? What qualification criteria, what credential do they need for that? In some cases, it's not a college degree. It may be something else. Certifications or other degrees might be needed. And so examining that with an equity focus in mind would be important, knowing that in some cases, finances are a tremendous drawback for a number of populations. What are the career fields and the occupations that have that strong labor market? We just talked about that. And then ensuring as much as possible, knowing that there might be limited resources, but doing what we can to shore up, if you will, the curriculum and the instruction, core academic content, extracurricular and co-curricular activities. And we might say this requires money, and in some cases it does. And in other cases, if we think about a strength-based approach, an asset-based approach, we're also thinking about what is available to us to help us on this path. And that can be someone who used to play football or basketball, or somebody who knows how to work with their hands well for sewing or making or creating. And there are community members with so many gifts in music, in the arts, in so many things that can be a part of this effort of molding, mentoring our young people, of being a part of this whole effort that we're talking about here that's equity-minded, that may not require a lot. In some cases, we need to do better by our schools and our funding. And we can also think about the ways in which we do have some of those resources available to us. And if you are out there and you're a community member, you're a business person, you're an artist, musician, you're a physician, whatever your field is, think about how you might contribute your efforts to a local school, college, or university. Could you hire a group of interns? Can you take them on a trip? Can you walk them through your lab? Can you take them through your studio? Can you show them your part of your community center? Help them with teaching them how to mentor others, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts. There's so many institutions to which we might be able to expose our young people, our students, that might change their lives. Diversity and development are very much a part of leadership and thinking about what our staff might need, what our faculty might need, and how we might do that. We mentioned culturally responsive, pedagogies, expectant approaches that we will expect of our young people, that we will expect of groups where persons might have written them off in the past, that we will speak life into their experience and speak the most positive things about what they can do in the future. And exposing students to high impact practices, that is, group seminars and research, experiential learning, where possible global learning, diversity learning, whether actually going abroad whenever there's a moment to do that, or reading and experiencing things online wherever that is possible, multiple languages. There's so many parts of internships I mentioned before that are part of high impact practices. I'm going to keep it moving because I am conscious of the time, and there are some personal stories I would like to tell you to bring some of this to life. So let's review what we've talked about so far. We've talked about the current context, social, political, medical, racial, and so forth. And we've also talked about equity as process and outcome, why it's important to be equity-minded in education, and how important leadership is in that. The final framework that I'll share with you today is collective impact. And I love this because it's many hands making work light. It is bringing multiple people together, stakeholders together in a structured way to achieve social change. So collective impact is bringing people together in a structured way to achieve social, organizational, community change. What we've seen over the last decade or so is that collective impact initiatives have emerged in cities and communities all across the country, and in fact, throughout the world. And it refers to a cross-sector collaboration, bringing people together from a broad spectrum of organizations to solve a specific problem in a community, academic community, professional community, or physical community. And it can be exhilarating when it works well. So some people might say, well, isn't collective impact just collaboration? It is connected. It's certainly a deeper form of collaboration. Collaboration typically implies a two-way street, and that's great. With collective impact, we think about it as building on the muscle of collaboration to create an entire community that is intentional about its approach to solving a problem together. So how do we adopt a collective impact approach? And what does it actually look like? So it's a 5-condition approach to solving complex societal problems or organizational problems. And what's important here is effective communication between and alignment of partner organizations. So it is a 5-condition approach to solving complex societal problems using effective communication between and continuous alignment and partnering of organizations. So here are the 5 conditions. A common agenda or shared goals, shared measurement system, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, backbone support organization. So I'll talk through each briefly. But as I'm sharing this with you, I would like you to be thinking about your organization or organizations, about your community, and how you might implement, if not all of these right away, some of these in order to bring about the kind of impact we need. Because certainly what we have seen in this time, particularly in this last year, is no one person will or can have the answer. Very often it's multiple people from different disciplines, perspectives, regions, bringing different ideas to the table to say, we have a problem in education, we have a problem in healthcare, here's what I think we might do. If you think about the COVID pandemic, for example, We're not only looking to Dr. Fauci to solve everything. We're not just looking to public health professionals. We're talking to teachers, community members. We are interacting with frontline workers. What are their concerns and needs? What do we need to be thinking about? The conversation about who should be the first to get the vaccine, for example, didn't only happen with physicians. It happened with so many others: nurses, social workers, families, different kinds of patients, different age groups of persons. And then over time, you said, okay, first we'll do this group, and then we'll do, I think it's 65 plus, and then we'll do persons in nursing homes and so forth. That took quite a bit of thinking and collaboration, and I would dare say collective impact. So the shared goals are important to establish. This is a common agenda. We want to solve some of the issues related to inequitable outcomes in education. We would like to decrease the gaps and the disparities, and we would like to increase access and success. These are some shared goals that community members, faculty, teachers, parents, students, business people, private and public sector, many of them want to solve. So having a set of shared goals and then a shared measurement system. Great to have these lofty goals, but how will we know if we've achieved them? So a shared measurement system and then mutually reinforcing activities so that one activity depends on another, feeds on another, and supports another. So things aren't done in a silo and that we continuously communicate. Think about a cycle: once a month, once a week, once a quarter. I'll share with this professional community, I'll share with the school, I'll share with all parents, I'll share with all stakeholders. Here's what we're doing in this institution to advance our goals. And then having the backbone part of the organization that's administrative, that supports the assessment, that supports what we're doing, that reminds us that we need to have a town hall. We haven't had a town hall in a while. Let's think about that. What we're doing is shifting from the way that we've operated in the past. And so again, think about your organization. We're moving from specialized agendas to common agenda. Measurements that so one year we measure it, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. We might look at recruitment, sometimes we look at retention. Independent activities where people do their own thing, to activities that are connected, that are aligned, from communication every now and then when we feel like it, every 4 months, maybe in the summer and then in the fall, and we may not hear anything else for another year, to communication that's continuous, efforts that are not supported either by senior management or leadership, to ones that in fact have some infrastructure and some resources behind it. So look at your organization and think about where you might be on this continuum from 0 to 5 for each one, and see how you might score yourselves and what you might want to improve. So collective impact on you. We don't know where you are or what your circumstances are, but think about what you might do, what your one thing or many things might be to bring about the changes in education or wherever you find yourself in this journey of life. And I'd like you to think about how we together bring about the changes we want to see. And I heard Dr. Mae Jameson a few years ago on a talk show on NPR speaking about how she became interested in STEM and how she eventually became the first African-American woman to go to space. And she said the 3 E's were really important: exposure, experience, and expectation. So in terms of collective impact, we can apply our common energy and knowledge, providing for our students, for our community, exposure, knowledge, and experience along with expectation. I believe you can do this. And this really matters. It matters because, I'm not going to say how many years ago, but when I was 10 years old, I had a teacher who became the principal of our school who had a local spelling bee in my school. And I thought, I don't think I'm going to do this. I'm nervous. I don't want to spell in front of other people. Well, she asked me to participate in the competition, and I did. And I got to the top. And in fact, I won the spelling bee for the school. And I thought, amazing. This is really awesome. She was a woman way before her time. And she said, well, you know, I'm going to pick a boy and a girl. So she picked a student. And she said, I'll pick him and I'll pick you so that there will be 2 from our school that will go forward. And I remember what it took to participate in that spelling bee. The number of times that I had to meet with her at lunchtime, this friend of mine and I hated it, absolutely hated it. I wanted to be with my friends. I wanted to be outside playing. And she had me look, if you remember those old doors, the stained glass doors that were like clear glass, and I could see my friends running through, I could see the picture along, like a little mosaic, if you will, of them playing outside, and I wasn't. And she said to me, You can go out there to play and that'll be fine. Do you see those kids? They're having fun. You'll get out there soon enough. But she saw something special in me and she said, Diane, essentially stick with me. I believe that you can do this. And she spoke to my friend as well, who was chosen. And we went really far in the city. We ended up placing second on behalf of my school. I didn't win that competition. I won another one later. And it was less about winning the competition. And it was more about someone saying to me, come, I see something special. I see something special in you. I believe in you. And not only will you do a good job, I think you can win. I had not heard something like that before from a teacher, and it changed my life. My children are tired of hearing that story, by the way. And there's more to it, but the essence was she expected that with hard work and sacrifice that both he and I would do well in the competition, and we did. And we also learned how to spell along the way, so that was great. I'll share one more story with you about career day. So that was in my elementary school. And then I'll share with you career day in my high school. And it was an all-girls school, it still is. And I remember I took the assessment tests and it said law, education, or counseling, or something in psychology. And actually, I do all of that in my roles, have done in the last 20 or so years in my roles. And so we would change classroom to classroom. We would change, track to track, education or law or whatever it was. And I think I was on my way to the law track. A friend of ours, her mother was a judge. And so I was going to listen to that talk. And I was passing and I saw these women passing us in white. And I thought, what is going on? I had not seen this before. When I did a double take, there were 2 women pilots. We're talking about over 30 years ago. I had not seen that before. I had not seen a woman in the cockpit before. But that day in my girls' school, I was able to see 2, not one, but 2 women pilots. And I think one was a parent of a student at our school. And so all the while when I, grew up and I started hearing people talking about it, I thought to myself, in terms of exposure and having the experience, I didn't go to their talk because I was tracked to go somewhere else. But in terms of watching them and seeing that that was possible, even though I didn't choose that in my profession, I always knew if I wanted to be, I could be, because I was exposed to that. I had the experience of seeing them. And similar with the spelling bee, someone had the expectation that, Diane, you can do this and you might even win. And what do you know? That's actually what happened. So imagine the possibilities if all of our students from birth through college and beyond had equal access, equal and open access to all of these opportunities. If there were no structural barriers, if there were no students born in poverty and no one tracked to low achievement or grades or those kinds of things, imagine in this model that if we did something like that for all of our students, faith leaders, accountants, teachers, community members, what we might do. So I share with you the why, and certainly thank you for your time today. Just walking through this journey, talking about equity and why it really matters and collective impact. And I leave you today, very conscious of the time, I leave you today with this quote from another great leader, transformational leader, Mother Teresa, who says, I can do things you cannot. You can do things I cannot. Together, we can do great things together. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. Go forth and make that collective impact. Thank you again.